Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just click the link in the show description to support now.
All Elite Wrestling and the Black News Channel. Now, these are both businesses that are owned by Shad Khan. In the case of All Elite Wrestling, the president is Tony Khan, Shad's son. And in the case of Black News Channel, Tony sits on the board. So here's my question. Are there similarities between the two companies as it relates to the way that people of color and women in particular have been treated? Ooh. Our favorite mathematician, Rob the Genius, returns to discuss these two issues in particular. He's crunched some numbers, he's done his research, and now we're going to provide some analysis. That's right. But before we get to any of that stuff, folks, listen. You know I keep talking about it. Zencastr. Okay, it is my go-to program for recording, especially as it relates to our wonderful guests. You visit Zencastr, Zencastr.com. I'm telling you, you can do audio, you can do video, studio quality sound, really unmatched. And what's really cool is that everything is recorded on separate tracks. So it makes it so easy to edit. Visit Zencastr.com. Once again, Zencastr.com for more information. And now, let's get on with the show.
You're locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke Loves Rasslin.
And there is no one that does it better than
Your host,
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
the Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, I am a man of the people, and when the people speak, I got to listen, okay? I'm not going to call you bots. I'm not going to say that whether you are patting me on the back or whether you're cussing me out. I'm not going to say that it's not real. It's all real out there. And one of the things that I often hear is that Rob the Genius is someone that brings an element of credibility to this show that is very important. And one of the main reasons why is because this man is legitimately a mathematician. He cares about the facts. He cares about the figures. And when he's given his opinion, when he's given his analysis of the facts and the figures and coming to some type of conclusion based on his understanding of what's going on, it's always high quality stuff. And that's why there's never a question. Whenever Rob is available, he knows he can come on this show and we can pick up where we left off. And certainly he has some interesting things that I've been saving. I haven't been commenting on the show because I've been waiting for Rob to be available to talk about this. So this is going to be fun. Without further ado, welcome back to the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast, my brother, Rob the Genius. What's going on there, Rob?
Hey, man, good to be back.
Hey, it's always a pleasure. Listen, let's start off with how people can find your stuff, because there is a growing appetite for the analysis of how women's wrestling is being featured on TV. Somehow, some way, suddenly people care about women's wrestling and how it's not being featured in AEW properly. So tell everybody what your website is, please, so they can just go straight to it right now as they listen to us.
All right, so it is robsagenius.com, ROBSAGENIUS, all one word.com. And so what I have there right now, I have my full report from last year, and I think it's called Women's Wrestling on TV. I believe that's the title. So that's an older one. That is from last year. That's a full report on women's wrestling on TV from 2021. And then I have an ongoing one. It's called Women's Wrestling on TV Present in History. Now that is an ongoing piece that I update in real time, but I do it. But again, I have the finished product from 2021, and that's called Women's Wrestling on TV in 2021. And now don't let the date stamp on that one is September, but I kept updating it through the end of the year. So that is for all of 2021. And so you can see what I did there. And basically, I just went back and I counted up on, 5 different shows, how many matches, every week, how much time they got, who was in them, how many were in the main, how many times were they in the main event or not, and it sounds like a lot to do. And it was a lot to get started, but once I got rolling, updating it every week is pretty easy now. Doesn't even take 15 total minutes to update it now every week.
Well, that's great. And what's funny is that people are finally, it comes in waves where they want to pay attention to that. They want to talk about that. I don't necessarily know what happened recently to get people excited about it again. It could be as simple as you and I having these conversations, and it was a slow build, but it really crescendoed over the past couple of days since WrestleMania. People calling out AEW on their lack of women's wrestling content on their television shows. And the first thing that came to mind was, well, Jesus, Rob has been tracking this. So if you folks really want to see what it's all about, just check his workout, because it really tells the tale in a manner that is hard to deny. And I'll tell you, Rob, the thing that really was interesting is that some folks like Denise Salcedo from she does stuff with Wrestling Observer. She does things with Fightful. She said she was going to start watching matches with a stopwatch, and she was making reference to WWE and her frustration with them. And I'm waiting to see if she's going to use a stopwatch against AEW, because all she has to do is read your site and she can see what the hell they've been doing, or rather what they have not been doing. And I'm not picking on Denise, respect to her and what have you and everybody else, but I think that the wrestling media in general, I don't know why they've given AEW a pass on this, but they have. They have not been as enthusiastic about calling them out on their sexism, which is what it looks like to me. And, we're going to continue to hammer that message home here on Duke Loves Rasslin. And when I say we, I mean myself, because it's bullcrap. Call out everybody who's not doing it right. Okay, I think SmackDown does a piss poor job, just like how you display on your site, which you're showing the facts. SmackDown does a piss poor job, but overall, WWE does a good job. Impact does a great job. AEW does the worst job.
And now again, the issue to get on WWE about is the match times. But then with AEW, the match times are usually better, but everything else is not, from allotment of matches to pretty much everything. I mean, everything they do other than the match times is usually bad. Now this week, last night, they had one match. They had 1 2-minute match, which means they didn't even get that right last night. I mean, but I know we can get to that some other time. But so last night they struck out on every front. On Dynamite last night, but yeah, it's I guess well, I don't know where the increased interest in it is as far as checking this stuff. I mean, for me, it was just that I happened to notice these things, and because I last spring, basically, the match times there were some just horrendously short matches on SmackDown, and it happens so often that it was after a while, just like, okay, come on now, right? And then and they weren't squash matches, like 2-minute squash match, okay, fine, but a match between two people who can give you 6 or 7 minutes on TV, and you cut them down to 2, then it happens over and over and over. I mean, that's egregious, and it stuck out to me. So that got me to really pay attention to what was going on. And like I said, when in our first conversation, on this show, I said, if you're going to talk about there being a discrepancy or disparity, like, you actually have to count the stuff. You actually have to count up what's going on, because you can't just say there's disparity without any evidence. Because I mean, the worst thing to do is to try to point out some inequality or some disparity, and then have somebody throw something in your face that basically disproves your whole point, right? That's that's the worst thing that can happen.
You know, Rob, let me ask you, because you're a guy that deals with the numbers world, mathematician. You understand the whole ratings system game and all that good stuff there. Based on what you know and what you've studied, based on conversations that you've had with other professionals, is it reasonable to assume that a television network in 2022 would ever tell a pro wrestling company that they should feature less women on their television show? Does that even make sense to you?
No, that I sincerely doubt that would ever happen. Okay.
And do you think that women, if you were to have, right now we have AEW who only features one women's wrestling match per week per television episode. If they were to even give us two women's wrestling matches, do you think that they would experience some kind of dramatic dip in whatever type of ratings or audience that they're delivering currently?
I doubt it. Now, a lot of it has to do with how you present it. I don't think that going to 2 matches a week would harm anything. Trust me, I sincerely doubt that, if you got 1 million people watching now, we only got one women's match. If you put on a second women's match every week, they're not dipping to 500,000. Okay. That's not going to happen. All right. I mean, so I don't think, no, they're not going to have any problems having more than one women's match. Now, what I think the kind of awful truth here is that their core audience largely does not care. We're over 2 years now into Dynamite being on the air, and from people who are AEW fans, it's still, yeah, the women's division, they need to do that better. Okay, but if you're still doing that after 2 years, if you're still giving them that much rope after 2 years, if you're still giving them that much grace after 2 years, over 2 years, then what they're doing now isn't a problem for you.
So here's my question to that, because that's a very good point. Their general audience seems to be okay with the lack of women's wrestling content on their programming, but how do you survive if all you're doing is harnessing such a small population? And I guess that's the issue there, where you have people who had done so much to put AEW over as a concept that they kind of went too far in over promoting it, and now they are starting to be a little bit more audience piece by piece. I mean, a little more honest piece by piece, and acknowledging the fact that, hey, Tony is not giving us what he told us he was going to give us. And even if we just focus on the women specifically, the fact that almost 4 years later, you're still only giving us one women's match on TV per TV episode, there's no way to justify that in 2022. It doesn't make sense. You can't call yourself somebody that respects women and women athletes if you're doing that. And some of these arguments are, well, maybe they're just not good enough. And it's like, well, whose responsibility is it to recruit and to provide an opportunity for women who are good enough? And for those who you already have, whose responsibility is it to help them become good enough? If they're not good enough, then what are you doing about it? Right?
There not being enough good women wrestlers to put on TV, I think that's no longer an excuse, because they brought in Toni Storm, but Athena, Ember Moon, she's still out there. You can bring her in right now, and she's better than the majority of the women they have on that roster. You could bring her in right now, put her on TV right now. Okay, she's got years of WWE television experience. She knows what camera to look at. She knows when to pause. She knows if you're going to have a commercial break in the middle of the match. She knows that when to do a certain spot to set up the commercial break. Right? She knows all of those things. Unless she's just not interested, and then I would have to say, if for some reason she's not interested, I would really have to ask why. And I mean, ask Tony why. Like, why is she not interested in coming to your company, right? And Mia Yim is out there, and Mia Yim's husband works for the damn company. So unless she just doesn't want to come there either, why are you making no effort to sign her? She was on NXT for years. Again, she knows how to look. She knows which camera to look at. She knows all the things you do to make a good televised wrestling match, right? She's another. If she does not want to work there for some reason, then that's a reflection on the company. Because you could bring her in, you could sign her right now and put her on TV next week, right?
Well, let me challenge something for a second, Rob. Let me challenge something for a second because you're talking about people to add, but they have women that they've already been using. Do you really feel that out of the women that they've used over the past year, they don't have enough women to feature on television enough to have more than one women's match on their television shows per week?
Oh, they do. But if I'm speaking to the argument that there aren't enough, that the women aren't good enough to do that with, because there are clips that get put out on Twitter every week about where they show clips from some of those matches where just some really bad spots. And now I will say that women get heat for that way more than guys do, because men's matches there are men's matches with all types of horribly executed spots and whatnot, and you don't see as many clips and stuff get passed around about those as you do with women's matches. But still, one of the arguments about them against them having more women's matches is that is that they don't have enough women who are good enough, right? And look, there are some women there who would not be good enough to get on WWE television. All right, Tay Conti was not good enough to be a regular on NXT, right? There were like a dozen women there who were just better than her at the time when she was there, right? She was not good enough to get on NXT television regularly. Right? She did a few times, but not regularly. Okay, so they got some other women there who are about her level who, were you to send them over to WWE now, they would not get on television. So I'm just saying that there are women available now who have been on WWE television who you could employ right now, other than the ones you've already signed.
Tony Khan has told me himself, forget about what he said out in public, because he said the same thing in public, but he's told me himself, he should know he's the one who puts all the shows together. Tony Khan is the booker. They don't have writers. They don't have people booking. They don't have a booking team or anything like that. It's Tony Khan. He makes the decisions. He puts all the shows together. There was a time where other people would contribute, but he shut all that out. And generally, he is the one taking sole responsibility for what we see on television, on all of the shows. So if we don't see more women's wrestling content, specifically matches, not just a 10-second promo or a 20-second promo, if we don't see more matches, it's because Tony Khan has chosen not to give it to us. So it's a little embarrassing, and it's indicative of this weird thing that they have going on where it's clear there are some significant biases at play, because there's no other logical explanation for why in 2022 you would not feature women more. You know what I mean? Especially when you claim that you're going to pay them equally, which we know that still hasn't happened yet. So it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And I want to stay on this point because something else happened, Rob, and I challenge you to take a look at it. And I know that it wasn't necessarily something that you knew everything about. You had to actually take some time and really research it to start to understand what the hell was going on. Black News Channel, this 24-hour cable news network that's still owned by Shad Khan, right? Overnight, over hundreds of people, mostly black and brown people, were put out of work. And to date, the majority of them have still not been paid in full for the hours that they worked. So, you're talking people who've lost their insurance benefits, they lost their pay, and there's a possibility that these folks will never get their payment in full for the hours that they worked for this 24-hour cable news network owned by Shad Khan, which the network is initially pushed as a black conservative cable news network, which is just embarrassing because there's no audience for that anywhere on this planet to sustain a 24-hour news network. But you did your research. What sort of information did you come up with, Rob? What's your take on this whole Black News Channel thing and all these folks who were just put out of work just like that?
Okay, so this Black News Channel is what I would call, it's ideological media. And what that means is that it exists for the sole reason to put out an ideological message. All right. And it does not exist to make a profit. There are magazines, websites, cable channels that exist just to put out a message. And they get donations from rich people who are on that side of the political aisle to pay the bills. And because they don't have enough viewers or subscribers or whatever to pay for themselves. And they live off of donations from rich people, basically. But they don't exist to make a profit. They exist to put out a message. And these rich people basically fund them for that, just to put a message out. And then the ultimate goal is to get their ideological message kind of embedded into more mainstream news outlets, right? And to get some of their people invited on, like Meet the Press or whatever, right? So that they can sit there so they can sit there on a respectable political panel, so to speak, and basically throw these ideological talking points out there, right? That's how partisan, like truly partisan political media. That's how it works. It exists to put a message out. It doesn't exist for anything else. They keep the lights on by donations, by people just, and they run on shoestring budgets. They don't have big portfolios or whatever. So you have things like this, and you have the One America News Network, and then there are these. There are a couple of magazines, like the National Review, and one is called the American Conservative and Newsmax, and then there's some left wing ones like Mother Jones and The Nation, right? And again, those also, they exist to put a message out. They don't exist to make a profit. And so with this Black news channel, basically, it was a thing that was created to put out a message that would maybe just get a few more Black people to vote Republican. Because, I mean, the way that, if you look at like the, polling data as far as voting demographics, basically, in presidential year, the Republicans get somewhere between like 55 and 60% of the white vote. Or sometimes it gets as high as 65, maybe here of the white vote. And that's basically how they win when they win. Because with Black people, they lose 90 to 10, right? And then Hispanic vote, varies, but gets as high as 2/3, Democrat. And then other ethnic minorities and whatnot, they vote Democrat pretty heavily. So if you can siphon off a few people, if you can shave a few points off of the 90%, Black people to vote Democrat, you can win an election. So they're not trying to convert, all of us into voting Republican. They just want to get a few people. And this small little channel, because if they can just, they keep repeating the same message and they keep repeating it. And then maybe, they end up on a YouTube video somewhere and that gets shared. And you know what? And maybe you can convert a couple of people. And that's the point. Because look, I mean, with 2016, there were all those YouTube videos about, Pizzagate, right? Where they had you think that, people were honestly believed that Hillary Clinton was running a child trafficking operation out of the basement of a pizza parlor that we found out didn't even have a basement. Okay. But there were a lot of people who believed that because they saw these videos over and over and over saying this stuff. So you create these little outlets, whether it's a channel or a website or whatever, and you just have people talking and they just keep saying it and they keep saying it and they keep saying it. And you say it enough times, somebody's going to believe it. Or even if you're making a factual argument, or just giving an opinion, you say it enough times, you might convince a few people. So that was the whole point behind the Black news channel. And now there were these Supreme Court hearings, and they had, now every person they had on the channel was not like a conservative, right? They had some people like Mark Lamont Hill, and I think was it a few other people, Bob Herbert maybe, or was it Charles Blow, I think, but those they're not those are not conservative people. And so I think they had some of them on there to talk about the hearings and all that. And so from what I understand, they did actually get better like viewership and all of that during that. But the coverage kind of veered off a message. And this is the thing with those outlets. If they got to choose between, more viewers or more money, even if they got to choose between that and staying on message, they're going to choose to stay on message. And if there's no way to stay on message, they'll pull the plug. Because if you want now, because there's an example of this actually. There used to be this conservative magazine called the Weekly Standard, and they were big during the W. Bush administration, and then Trump got elected, and so Trump getting elected was kind of a line in the sand moment for a lot of conservatives, right? Because Trump was just so far out there that a lot of people on that side were just like, okay, I believe in lower taxes, I believe in this, and this, but that guy is doing a little too much here, or that guy's a little too crazy here, right? And so there were some real debates and not sure what to do and all of that on that side, And so the Weekly Standard was one of those magazines where the people there were just openly like, okay, we're conservative, but don't know if we can ride with all this Trump stuff. And so they, veered a little bit off of the trail, and they got bought out and they got shut down.
This is fascinating insight here, Rob, and that's very, very interesting. Fascinating. So with Black News Channel, do you think that with Black News Channel, because they really put some effort into veering more to the center as opposed to remaining a conservative 24-hour Black News Channel, do you think that was part of the reason why the plug was pulled ultimately?
It's definitely a possibility. I'm not going to sit here and say that was definitively it. But in this case, with these Supreme Court hearings, the nominee was just somebody you couldn't throw the right wing talking points at her without just looking like an idiot, right? I mean, some people are very easy to caricature, but she was not, and it got to the point where you couldn't have a real conversation about her as a nominee or whatever, and if you were going to veer off into talking point land, you just sound like an idiot. So, I mean, the coverage they had didn't toe the line. Now, again, I'm not going to say that definitively that's what happened, because he declared bankruptcy. It could simply be that he, didn't want to sink any more money into it. But I would go ahead and say that if it was getting the job done as originally, put together, or if they were doing exactly what they were created to do, then I'm going to go as far as to say that he wouldn't have been so quick to say this isn't worth the money. Okay, because ultimately, they declared bankruptcy and pulled the plug because they decided it wasn't worth the money that they put into it. Now, if it was delivering the type of message that they wanted it to deliver, I'm willing to bet that they would at least stuck with it a little bit longer. Because look, Shad Khan owns the Jacksonville Jaguars. You own an NFL team that's like an ATM, basically. So it's not that. Trust me, he didn't declare bankruptcy because he's having trouble making. Because he's legit having trouble making payroll. Okay, he declared bankruptcy. That was a choice. Totally, that was a completely voluntary thing. Because he doesn't need the money. Okay, and whatever money he might be saving from declaring bankruptcy on that small of an operation, if you're in that dire straits financially, then you got bigger problems. So, I mean, I think this is one of those things where you can definitely put two and two together, and it's not out of the question to at least come to the conclusion that they shut it down because it wasn't getting the message across. Now, and that may not just be about the Supreme Court hearings. That could just be across the board. I will admit I did not watch much if any, of that channel. So I can't tell you what their what their coverage was like, all day or whatever. But given, put it, I mean, I used to I used to be a real political junkie as far as looking up information on all of these kind of things, and I can just tell you I can feel safe to tell you from previous, research I've done in the past on these kind of things, that it is not out of the question to come to the conclusion that they decided that this thing was not doing what it was supposed to do. And since we're not making any money on it anyway, then we're just going to, get it out of here.
Well said. Well said. See, and listen, let me just say this on a personal level, and this is my take. This has nothing to do with Rob. This is just my take. I think it's rotten. I think it's disgraceful. I think we got these fake wokesters who want to say Black Lives Matter and all this other garbage. They want to say they support women's rights and all that garbage as well. And I call it garbage because they're not genuine about what they're claiming. Okay. This has been my number one issue with the way that the cons do business. And I'm not saying this out of nowhere. Okay. I'm using the facts, I'm using what they claim. And then I'm taking a look at what the end result is of their business practices, and it's rotten. Okay. And I'm telling you right now, that black news channel stuff in particular, it was rotten from the beginning. What the hell is a Pakistani businessman doing running a 24-hour black conservative news station? And you only invested $50 million into it, which is a drop in the bucket for something that's supposed to last for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Give me a break. You look at AEW, they gave them $100 million startup capital for a damn company that was running one TV show one day, 2 hours per week when it first started. So how do you overly fund something that's so small in comparison and you underfund something that's such a big deal? It doesn't make any sense, And I'm going to say it again. There is no market for a 24-hour black conservative news channel anywhere on this planet. There's no market for it. You know why there's no market for it? Because the places that exist that could deliver that, they're already doing it on such a good scale. How the hell are you going to attract attention away from that? People can watch Fox News, they can watch OAN, they can watch Newsmax, they can watch all these other things. I'm sorry. The racism in America alone, you're not going to attract people to watch a 24-hour black conservative news channel. Now, with that said, if it was a 24-hour news channel that was center, now you have something that you can work with. Now you can build an audience that's sustainable. And I think that had that company launched the way that it had conducted itself over the past few months, it probably would have had a different fate. I think they would have had much better ratings, and I think they could have justified sticking around longer. But you also would need an investor who isn't trying to do something that, in my opinion, seems pretty rotten and nefarious and ridiculous. So, Shad Khan, Tony Khan, I am on your hind parts about your business practices, and I'm not going to let up because I think what you guys are doing is wrong. Stop trying to co-opt what we would consider diversity and inclusion when you're not putting any real equity into delivering on your promises. Stop doing that. It's not right. It's rotten. Okay. So I'm on your hind parts every step of the way. I don't care what businesses you got going on until you guys do right. You're going to hear from me about it.
Because, the whole nature of like partisan media is just, it's an entirely like separate world. Because again, they create things just for the point of getting a message across. They don't there are a lot of books that are written, left and right, where the books are written and they're, a bunch of copies are bought up by people, rich people on that side of the aisle, and they buy up a bunch of copies, and then the book ends up on the bestseller list. And now the person who wrote it is now New York Times bestselling author, which gets you invited places that otherwise wouldn't have been invited, right? And that those things are done to get you in the door so that you can sit at the table on Meet the Press or on Face the Nation or whatever. And so ideological political media is a whole nother ecosystem unto itself. Um, Again, it's created not to make a profit. It's created to get a message out. And of course, what that means is that, of course, when the people who are funding it, if they decide you're not putting out the right message, they can cut your money off, right? And again, I'm not, I didn't do like detective work here. I cannot tell you that is exactly what happened here, but I'm telling you that it fits the pattern. Okay, that it absolutely fits the pattern of what happens with ideological media sources and media outlets, is that it's more important to stay on message than it is to actually make money or gain viewers or anything. Because like some of these publications, actually I looked this up. All right, the American Conservative is a magazine. All right, it has according to Wikipedia, the subscriber number is 5,000 subscribers. There's no way you sustain a magazine with 5,000 subscribers, right? It doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. You're not going to do that. It doesn't work. The money, the economics don't add up. So obviously, there are people on that side of the aisle who funnel money into that operation so that it can get published. And this is also according to Wikipedia, National Review has 75,000 subscribers, and I don't think that's enough either to sustain a magazine with a staff and all of that. So again, there's money being poured into it, and same thing on the left with the Nation and with things like Mother Jones and American Prospect. Again, these magazines, they don't have enough subscribers to pay the bills. If they have a YouTube channel or website or whatever, they don't. I sincerely doubt that they have enough, subscribers or whatever, paying subscribers or whatever, to keep things open, right? And to pay people. So they get money funneled into them from, people who agree with their ideology, basically. And so this Black News Channel thing, it fits the mold, basically. And so you should not, if it ever comes out that is exactly why they shut it down, you should not be surprised. Okay. And again, so I'm not going to make the full leap and say that that's exactly what happened, but I'm saying it fits the pattern. Okay. So if it comes out that is what happened, you should not be surprised.
Well, Rob just hit it right on the head, folks. And it's something that we're going to continue to monitor. I have been in contact with people who are working for Black News Channel.
That's a window into a whole nother world there.
Listen, Rob, once again, let everybody know the best way that they can keep up with your content, please.
So if you're wondering, what's this got to do with pro wrestling? Well, it's because, Shad Khan, of course, is the backer behind AEW. And it matters as we have a bigger conversation about where these company owners' money comes from and all of that. And so if you want to reach me, if you want to see what I write about wrestling and some other things, you can, again, my website is robsagenius.com, ROBSAGENIUS.com. You can find me on Twitter at RBONNE1. Now, I don't really talk politics or write about politics, but I do write about wrestling and movies and TV and other things. So if you want to check out the stuff I have to say or stuff that I've written, you can go there. If you're a wrestling fan, you can hear me on the Mindless Wrestling podcast every week with DJ and Jason. And of course, you can hear me whenever I happen to show up here.
Ooh, yeah. You're the cream of the crop, and no one does it better. I'm here to eat tacos and kick ass. And I'm all out of kicking ass. Hey, Duke, this is your buddy here, Rudy Boy Gonzalez, your friend from Ring of Honor. I'm glad to see that you've made it from the third row chairs at the Murphy Rec Center to your own podcast. 6 years is a long time, and I hope you have another 6 years of success. I enjoy listening to your episodes, and I've enjoyed being on them. I've always liked your the way you go about things. Thank you. Congratulations. Love you, and peace.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Rudy Boy Gonzalez. That was a wonderful message there. And speaking of Rudy, we're definitely going to have him, Dusty Wolf, and James Beard. They're going to be on the show. In fact, when we're releasing that episode early next week, a tribute to the one, the only Mr. Ken Johnson. So look forward to that for sure. Great conversation this week with Rob the Genius. You know, just a really good guy and someone that he knows his stuff. You know, he's not afraid to do the research. He has an opinion, which he definitely will share, but most importantly, explain how he arrives at the conclusion that he arrives at. So really appreciate that from Rob. And I appreciate you. I mean, what do you think? What do you think of some of the things that we unpacked this week? Let me know. Okay, it's at Duke Loves Rasslin, RASSLIN, on Facebook, on Twitter, DukeLovesRasslin@gmail.com. You know, I'm not one to hide. I'm not one to run from conversation, from discussion. All I ask is that you don't approach me with vulgarities. You humanoids out there who love to start cussing, they lead with cussing because they disagree with my wrestling take. Imagine that. Calm yourself down. Let's have a real top shelf conversation. Okay? We don't have to agree, but we can have a top shelf conversation without you leading with trying to cuss me out because you can't believe I had to say something that, you know, you're afraid of me saying, or you don't agree with me saying, or whatever the case. Just stop it. That's not cool. That's not cool. You know what else is not cool? And I want to end on this note here because I see something interesting happening with WWE. Veer Mahan. Okay. You know, this whole Veer is coming stuff. Veer is coming. Well, he finally came all over Raw a couple times. And, you know, the way that they're presenting this guy is nothing short of ridiculous, in my opinion. They got this guy looking like some kind of crazed lunatic, which is so crazy to me because when you look at Veer Mahan in regular life, this is one of the most sharp dressed people on the planet. And the man has a head of hair that would make Ric Flair jealous. I mean, just a beautiful head of hair. This guy is the real deal. He just looks like the type of dude that you want to hang out with. And you know that if you go into the finest restaurant or the finest club with a guy like that, you're not waiting in line. Of course not. You're drinking top shelf. You're probably going to have the whole night comped. And there's definitely going to be ladies from all over the world who are going to be hanging around you. I mean, Veer is just a smooth dude, man. So I don't understand why they have this weird persona that they're pushing on TV of him because it just doesn't make any sense. So I don't know whose idea this is, but they really need to fix themselves up and recognize the fact that Veer Mahan should be the coolest man in the room because he is that in real life. He should always come out dressed in a suit unless he's ready to wrestle. He should have an entourage. He should be presented like a future world champion. And, you know, in terms of wrestling ability and what have you, that will come. But you don't present a guy like Veer, an international playboy looking guy like Veer, as some kind of lunatic out there. Like, come on. Why would you do that? So, you know, I know some of the higher ups in WWE, just like other companies, they listen to the show. So you can hear me loud and clear. I am not impressed with the way that Veer is being presented as a pro wrestler. This guy's much too fantastic, much too sharp, much too handsome to be saddled with a ridiculous gimmick. Just let Veer be Veer. And I'm telling you, man, there's plenty of money to be made in those hills right there. That dude is a real deal. My goodness. You know? And let me add to that, actually. One more take. Lacey Evans. They have her doing these vignettes where she's telling her true life story, which is an incredible story. She's been through a lot as a human being. She's overcome a lot. And I'm very proud of her as a human being because a lot of people don't make it out of some of the conditions that she's made it out of. So kudos to Lacey.
And I'll continue to say that. It's actually ironic. Her real name is not Lacey. That's actually her sister's name. I don't know if folks realize that, but that's neither here nor there. The character Lacey Evans is getting a lot closer to the real life person, which is cool. It looks like they're trying to present her as a babyface, which I think is very possible. I think there's a lot of people who would want to get behind a person like that. But she posted something the other day making fun of people because of 420. 420, it's not only is it October 20th, but 420 is a tagline for smoking marijuana. So she, poked a little fun at that, and it just didn't make any sense to me. You're trying to be a baby face, and you're doing a post that is just completely going to get negative feedback, and of course it did. WWE has an issue. They don't have baby faces in that company. They have tweeners. They have people who pretend to be heels, and then they have real heels who they're trying to force into being baby faces, and it just doesn't work. Lacey Evans is not a natural baby face. Clearly that's the case. Her natural instincts is to get under people's skin and to laugh about it. And okay, some people, that's just who you are. It's okay. I'm no different. I'm very similar to that. I know that I'm going to get people riled up in the things that I say, and I don't really care. So it's all entertainment to me. So I get it. But let me just say this. If you're going to present Lacey as a babyface, and if Lacey, if this is where you're going next, you got to hold off on those posts where you're making fun of the fans and doing nonsense like that. That doesn't endear you to anyone. It does the complete opposite. And there are just far too many heels in that company right now, especially in the women's division. They need somebody that people can get behind and believe in. And I think you have an opportunity where you can be a Mrs. America, as crazy as that sounds. I think that there's a strong possibility. And of course, you're going to have your detractors. You're going to have people going to boo you for it. But I think over time, you can really win the fans over. But you're not going to get there posting stuff like that online, especially from your Lacey Evans account. It's just, don't do that. It's counterproductive to what it seems like the company is trying to do with you and that character. So there's that. Who knows? It could be a protest. She could be doing it on purpose for all we know. Time will tell. But it just, wrestlers, you guys got to think about what you're trying to accomplish here. And you got to look at the landscape. Being a heel, quite frankly, is easy. I think it takes a lot more effort to be someone who can find a way to be likable. The fans, especially in this day and age, they will boo anyone who they feel is being fake. So to be your genuine self and to be a likable person is a challenge in the modern era, but it's possible. And the way that you can get there is to be mindful of these little things that add up into big things. So that's my take this week. Folks, once again, appreciate you joining us. Listen, give us a 5-star review. Go to your favorite podcast app, like whatever you're listening to us on right now. Give us a 5-star review. I really appreciate that. Our most recent episodes have been tremendous, especially the response. I don't talk about the rankings. I don't really care about the rankings so much, but we've been knocking those rankings out of the park on some of these podcast sites, and we'll continue to do that. I mean, hey, look, Duke Loves Rasslin is one of the top pro wrestling podcasts in the world. I know that. We have been for a number of years now, but it's still interesting to see in the ranking format, and you see all of these shows that you're being put up against, and to know that, yeah, we know we're one of the best, and there's another level of proof to that. So kudos to all you listeners out there. Appreciate you. As always, be kind to yourselves and be kind to others. Take it away, Tony Schiavone.
This is Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Rasslin.